South Africa's banking space has evolved significantly over the past couple of years. That's on the back of technological advancement. Joining us to chat about banking and innovation are Adrian Vermooten, who's Head of Payments and Digital Banking at ABSA's Retail Bank, and FNB's Head of Innovation, Paul Steenkamp. Gentlemen, we think of apps and we think of new devices that are brought to the market. One has to take a step back and remember it's for the customer. And I remember a few years ago, it was ABSA, in fact, that started, and when Steve Boyson was Chief Executive, started Sunday banking. They experimented in 4 branches, I think, in shopping malls, late in the morning on a Sunday, so as not to offend people who go to church. And you think, well, why didn't they do this before? So it's a sector that is conservative, should be conservative, because they're looking after people's money. But on the other hand, they've got to innovate to keep up with the customers.
Yeah, our strategy since 2004 has been customer centricity. So we've had innovation as a strategic pillar. We've been driving for 8 or 9 years now. And very much it's all about the customer in our minds.
But it's easy to say we're innovative. You won't come across a bank that says, hey, we're not innovative.
So I think that what you've got to remember is innovation isn't just about technology. So it's about putting the customer at the front of what you want to do. And we've just got a tagline that we use internally which says lives made much easier. So in every way you think, it's about lives made much easier. And then you've got to have a look behind that, because you can have people thinking innovatively, but how do you unleash that in terms of process and time to market and actually impacting directly on the customer?
Well, how do you?
So I think you have a look, and you can't do it. There's no one silver bullet. It's just a consistent message to the customer. If you have a look in the ABSA space over the last couple of years, we got to a point where customers said, hey, you're looking a bit expensive, etc. Where's the innovation in your pricing and your product? And you then come out and rebuild. So we launched last year, for example, a product called Value Bundles. The more you add, the cheaper it gets to bank each month. You talk about weekend banking. It doesn't make sense that you're in a mall where the mall's open till 9 p.m. but the branch closes at 4 p.m. So it's about matching your customer expectations and often then just trying to go one beyond and exceed what the customer's hoping to experience.
Paul, it's all good talking about banks becoming more innovative and looking at headlines like FNB named the most innovative bank in the world. I mean, how is that translated in business terms for you? How has it impacted so far for FNB on the bottom line? What kind of activity have you seen, and shifts in activity and trends when it comes to customers and how they're interacting with you right now?
Well, we've seen a massive migration of customers to FNB. In December 2011, we had 5.5 million customers. We're now up to 7.5 million customers. So I think clearly what's happening, especially in spaces like social media, where your marketing spend doesn't necessarily influence the opinion that people have of your brand. It's much more about what peers and friends and family are saying. We're seeing that we've got huge following in spaces like Twitter, 200,000 likes on Facebook, anecdotally at bars and dinner parties, FNB is coming up in conversation. And I think that's helping to drive the migration in a very credible way. Our customers are excited about our brand and our products.
But there'll come a point where the others catch up. I mean, I think the rest, the other banks, let's face it, we're having sleepless nights about the Steve campaign. But they will come up with other things. Nedbank, for example, is centering in on the security aspect of banking. Not saying that others aren't, but that's what they've positioned themselves at. But aren't we now at the point where we need different kind of innovation? So, for example, fees. I give you my money. When's the first big bank going to come along and say, we're not going to charge you fees? It can be done because you've got all this money that you're looking after.
Yeah. So I think you've got to be cautious of not running the risk of having a look at some European models where there's a 2-day delay before getting value on your money, and a third party or the bank is sitting on that value for 2 days, etc. I think we've got some of the really most advanced banking infrastructure and payments in South Africa. So the pricing models I think are slightly different. The consumer pressure is very heavy, and if anything, you've seen prices continue to come down. Removal of a lot of the penalty fee type environment for some transactions, and then a lot of focus choice in pricing around the kind of behavior that one wants to encourage the customer to do. So using your own your own bank's ATM infrastructure is way cheaper than going to a third party. Using your card for a payment often rather than cash or check. So it's really about encouraging what is efficient banking in terms of pricing, but you're serving different market segments. So the way you tweak innovation for a person who's really very debit card and cash orientated compared to a wealth client who's trying to build a portfolio, etc., is a different value proposition.
You talk about consumer pressure that's been exerted on the banks. What about competitive pressure? Because ABSA has been labelled the laggard when it comes to innovation amongst the big four banks. Of course, FNB, the leader in that regard. Just how much how under pressure have you been to start keeping up with technology and innovation on that front?
No, I think absolutely. Our customers expect their bank, whether it's FNB or it's ABSA, to be really out there with the right kind of solutions for the customer. So I think innovative pressure has been a focus within an ABSA environment, and really about saying, so how can we? And if we have a look in the last year, I think we've been out with sort of 6 or 7 innovations. So a new website, near field communication, tap your phone to pay, etc. City of Cape Town Transit, like a Gautrain, tap your bank card to pay, some innovative pricing, value bundles, and late last year we launched this
it never ends, because with the technology adapting every day and evolving so fast, you've got to keep up as well. So let's talk about just how fast you've got to adapt in order to survive in this environment.
Yeah, you have to be super fast. You have to be ahead of the curve. I think clearly what's very important is culturally we've got an appetite for innovation, and we recognize that we've got our traditional competitors, but our non-traditional competitors are IT shops with deep pockets. They're sitting on a lot of cash. It's only a matter of time before they pile into our market. So yes, we're customer focused, but we've also got to keep an eye on the horizon and look at where the industry is going. And
well, we're joined now by technology journalist at My Broadband, Jan Vermooten. Morning, Jan. We've just had the conversation about technology, but technology is a means to an end, and one can actually get too complicated, perhaps too fancy. Now, some of these banks have come up with very good products. There is a risk, perhaps, that they overinvest in fancy technology and forget that some things need to be kept simple?
I think and this is the beauty of something like tablets and smartphones, they almost force simplicity. So it's not like an online web app, a website or something like that can get overly complicated very quickly. The touch screen forces you to design for simple things. So something that comes to mind is FNB's GeoPayments thing. Now that's a fairly complex technology that has to be kept incredibly simple for it to ever work. So in that sense, I mean, the touch devices help them keep it simple. So from a consumer perspective, I don't think we understand the concept of overinvesting. As long as it makes my life easier at the end of the day, I don't mind.
Where that's what the customer is after, how are you rating innovation amongst South Africa's 4 banks right now?
So from a high-end consumer perspective, I look at what they're doing in the app space. I look at what their websites look like. And from a techie perspective, I look at what they're doing in terms of security. So Capitec, for example, for normal consumers, they offer incredibly secure options. So they offer a token rather than just an SMS. And they also have a security app that gives you 2-factor authentication through an app rather than through an SMS. We've had horrifying stories from folks who have had their SIM cards compromised for just a second, and then their bank accounts get hacked and they lose tens of thousands of rands.
It's also amazing how many people still fall for the scams. I mean, I had one yesterday, an SMS saying I'd just won 250,000 Rand from Mrs. Samantha, was the person who said, please phone the following number. It must work, otherwise they wouldn't do it. I mean, there's one born every minute. But we talked about checks a moment ago. In New York, most people routinely still pay with checks. We are almost at the point where people won't accept checks. So we moved to the paperless world.
Yeah, and that's perhaps driven by the fact that checks are actually, last time I checked, pun not intended, it's incredibly costly to pay with a check in South Africa. So the banks have almost guided us away from that as a payment mechanism. They've gone, you know what, I'll give you free swipes. I'll give you free transactions or free withdrawals at a specific place, but please don't use a check.
But I want to take you two up on the specific issue of costs and fees, because surely that's the next big innovation. Just as, for example, Steve, it changed the game for the retail space of getting people's attention. Yeah. One still looks at the fees and you say, but how can you charge me still all that money for doing what you do for me?
Yeah, so I think the fees are changing quite quickly from what was almost a pay-as-you-go basis, where every time you withdraw cash or every time you make a payment. And we've seen, I think, most of the banks in the last 2 years move to a more sort of bundled offering. So you pay your 69 Rand, whatever, per month, and within there, most of your transactions are covered. And then, of course, there's loyalty and rewards. Yeah. So we see customers really getting excited about the opportunity to earn points and earn rewards, and many customers end up at a net 0 point at the end of the month, because what they earn now meets or exceeds what they're paying out on a monthly basis.
Your experience with that at FNB, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. I bank for free. I mean, I earn more in e-bucks than I pay in bank fees, so I've exceeded that neck. And I get a tank of petrol for free as well via e-bucks every month. I think the secret is to reduce your fees. I mean, we've done very well in that space. In most segments, we're the cheapest bank. And one of the ways of doing that is improving your cost-to-income ratio using innovation. So it's not always about just the sexy stuff that makes it onto the TV shows.
Now Discovery's coming in with 50% back on your petrol if you go to BP. You guys, I think it's NGen for e-bucks. Yes. But now e-bucks, Bitcoin we talked about last week, and I said to the expert Arthur Goldstuck who came in, is this a kind of e-bucks, And I saw Mark Barnes of the Purple Capital writing in Business Day this morning. He's not quite sure what it is. But what it certainly is, it's a currency that is being used with whatever risk we don't know, but it's bypassing the banks.
Yeah, and until you want to turn it into something real, until you want to, if we're talking about e-bucks, e-bucks has a Rand value, and if you want to trade it in for something, it typically correlates to something in Rand.
Now that's easy to understand, but Bitcoin is actually a new currency which has a value too.
Yeah, and it's traded
But you don't have to go through FNB to get it.
No, you can go through whoever you want. You do need a bank account if you want to turn it into cash. If somebody accepts Bitcoin as barter, then you're good. But for the most part, I think you need to turn it into cash if you want to do something with it.
How are you assessing risk there? Because of course, the whole problem that I have with this is that you don't have someone backing this at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it goes back to what we value and what makes currency valuable, and it's almost pure faith.
It's because we agree. We agree that something is worth something. But from the bank's point of view, you must be keeping an eye on the Bitcoin issue, because what I would like is my employer to give me the cash. Why must I go through a bank to get it?
And I think, you mustn't forget that there are other quasi-currencies. So extensively in South Africa, prepaid airtime is used as a currency. So you can see people moving it between one another, sharing one another. You can buy, there are a couple of billion Rand a year worth of vote lines, content purchased, ringtones, etc. And the virtual currency can exist in a context. But I think the real challenge is when you try and always convert it into hard value, or you try and buy something which has real commercial value. So it's fine buying a ringtone with airtime, but when you try and buy a Coke from the vending machine with airtime, suddenly the two values just don't really align. And I think that's the challenge with currencies which are not underpinned by real value.
Paul, it really ups the ante, when you've got a customer like David saying, why do I have to go through a bank to get my money at the end of the day, access to my salary? I mean, where do you see things moving as we progress now?
Well, I mean, that voice of the customer is at the forefront of our strategy. I mean, we have to think like that, and we have to make it a no-brainer for David to bank with us. Make it exceptionally rewarding in a very authentic way, and that's the only way we can keep this kind of non-traditional competitive threat out and at bay.
The other issue is faith in the banking system. You mentioned a moment ago you agree on the value of a Rand, and then the piece of money changes hands. What's happened in Europe has been quite dramatic with Cyprus, whereby the regulators, the authorities have said we are raiding bank accounts. This, I haven't heard any protest from the banks. I would like the banks to have said, we do this under protest. We have a contract with these depositors. They've put the money with us and they trust us. If they put it in, say, property, it couldn't have been raided. If you're being innovative, you've got to think about this, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got to recognize that we're part of a global sector and be very mindful of the trends that we're seeing happening abroad.
Could it happen here? Could SARS tell you, well, SARS can already go into your account, but could the authorities come in and take money out of your bank?
So I think it's very unlikely. I think that the sophisticated payment infrastructure that we have in South Africa, the trust that the consumer has in terms of making those long-term deposits with us, would really undermine the stability of the national payment system. And I think that's one of the things that the Reserve Bank is really great at guarding, is the stability of our national payment system. Because if you lose that trust, you're in trouble.
Well, we'll have to stop there. Fascinating discussion on banking. It is all about trust when it comes down to it, and certainly our banking sector among the best in the world and has proved itself to be pretty innovative as well. That was Adrian Vermooten, who's Head of Payments and Digital Banking at ABSA's Retail Bank, FNB's Head of Innovators, Paul Steenkamp, and Jan Vermeulen joined us during the discussion. He's a technology journalist at My Broadband.